Her daughter-in-law shoved her with a laundry basket, then sneered, "You're not furniture. Stop sitting everywhere." Maggie Hall, the woman who paid off their $212,000 mortgage, didn't raise her voice. She stood up, quietly, walked out. By the next week, the house was under contract. Her name on the deed, her terms in the fine print. They never even read the clause that gave her full authority. And when the new owner arrived with a measuring tape, their legacy got boxed up and left on the curb. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Maggie Hall had only packed for a week. A week was generous, really, just long enough for the contractor to patch the ceiling damage from that freak hailstorm, repaint the entryway, and check the roofline flashing. She debated checking into the extended stay near Coit Road, but Eric had offered meekly to let her stay at the house. Rachel said it's fine, he'd added quickly, like the words might dissolve if spoken too slow. She hadn't been back since Christmas. Even then, it had felt like walking through someone else's Pinterest board. No shoes on the carpet, no food outside the kitchen, no raised voices or real opinions. Maggie kept her bag small, her expectations smaller. By day 2, she already regretted the grace. It was just after 10 a.m. when she eased herself into the sunroom's pale gray love seat. The one with the overly firm cushions and sterile throw pillows arranged like they'd been placed by a showroom manager. Sunlight spilled through the glass wall, warming the tiles beneath her feet. Maggie held a coffee mug in both hands, the kind of grip that makes something feel like yours, if only for a moment. She was watching a squirrel try to outsmart a badly hung bird feeder when the door pushed open hard. Rachel stepped in, holding an overstuffed laundry basket against her hip like a battering ram. "Oh," Rachel said flatly, stopping short. "Didn't realize you'd made yourself comfortable." Maggie set her mug on the small end table without a word. Rachel crossed the room, shoulders tense, eyes flicking toward the empty chair just 3 feet away. But she didn't want the chair, she wanted the couch. Her couch. As she moved past Maggie, she let the edge of the laundry basket dig into Maggie's knee. Not hard enough to bruise, just enough to send a message. "You're not furniture," Rachel muttered. Loud enough to register, sharp enough to cut. "Stop sitting everywhere." Maggie blinked once. Then again, the silence between them felt louder than anything Rachel had just said. From the kitchen doorway, Eric appeared. He had a spoon in one hand, probably halfway through his cereal. His mouth opened, then closed again. He said nothing, not even Rachel's name. It was Lacey, 17 and silent as a whisper, who hovered in the hallway behind them. She didn't speak, didn't gasp or rush to intervene, but her eyes locked with Maggie's, wide and burning with something between apology and helpless fury. Maggie stood, no sigh, no noise, just the deliberate grace of someone who had survived worse moments and remembered all of them. She picked up her purse from the floor, adjusted the strap over her shoulder, and walked past both of them. Eric stepped slightly aside but still didn't speak. Rachel turned toward the hallway like she hadn't just nudged a woman in her late 60s with a basket of dirty clothes and a hiss of disdain. Maggie opened the front door. The Texas sun caught the storm door just right, throwing a hot pane of light across the entryway. She didn't look back. By dusk, Gwen was at her kitchen table, a bottle of chilled Chardonnay between them and 2 glasses poured. Gwen's gray curls were clipped back, and she wore her old paralegal reading glasses, like she was ready to go cross-examine someone. "So," Gwen said, tapping her fingers once on the stem of her glass, "how bad was it?" Maggie didn't flinch. "She told me to stop sitting everywhere." Gwen's eyes narrowed. "That's not a person. That's a warning sign." Maggie pulled open the drawer beneath the counter. She took out a plastic folder, thick with documents, tabs, signatures. "I think it's time," she said quietly. "Time to clean the title." 3 years ago, Eric had called her just past midnight. His voice had cracked like drywall under stress. "They're foreclosing, Mom. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, but Rachel's cousin was wrong about the refinancing. We're behind. 2 months. Maggie hadn't scolded him. She hadn't reminded him of the 4-bedroom house they shouldn't have bought, or the hybrid SUV that had barely left the driveway during his unemployment stretch. She had said only 2 words, "Come by tomorrow." The next day, she wrote a check that cleared the mortgage in full, $212,438.76. And in return, she had Clay Monroe draw up paperwork that added her to the title as co-owner, with right of first sale and full escrow authority. No one objected then. Not when she was the safety net. Not when the bank was circling. Now in her kitchen, with Gwen flipping through the documents again, Maggie could feel the weight of every signature like a shadow growing sharper with age. They never even read the terms, did they? Gwen asked, tapping the clause labeled First Right of Liquidation, Co-Owner Authority. Rachel asked if it meant I could call the plumber without them. Maggie said. I didn't correct her. Gwen chuckled, then sobered. You sure you want to do this? Maggie didn't hesitate. I'm done mistaking grace for permission. She picked up her phone and dialed. Clay's office still had the same receptionist from a decade ago. Same syrupy hold music, same efficiency. When Clay came on the line, his voice was calm but alert. He remembered her. She didn't waste time. It's time to invoke my clause. A pause. Understood, he said. You'll need to come in. Bring the originals. I still have the notarized file, Maggie replied. Everything clay-colored and triple-tabbed. She hung up and went to the closet where she kept her fireproof case. The documents were right where they'd always been, beneath the sealed envelope labeled Lacey. If anything happens and her husband's Navy discharge papers. She took them out, checked the signatures again. Every I dotted, every line airtight. Across town, Gwen pulled up the homeowner's insurance account online. Her paralegal instincts never dulled. One click, then another. You're still the named policyholder, she called out. Premiums come from that joint escrow account you opened. You're paying it. Not them. Not anymore, Maggie said. She logged into the escrow management site. An account she'd created when she bailed them out, meant for taxes, emergencies, house upkeep. She'd been the primary on the account all along. She clicked twice and froze the fund, locking out new withdrawals until further notice. Let them call the plumber now. That afternoon, Maggie sat on her porch with a glass of iced tea, watching a monarch butterfly skim over her neighbor's hedges. Her phone buzzed. It was a screenshot from Gwen. Rachel had just posted on her public Facebook feed, "Some people forget their guests, but that's fine. Furniture moves, foundations stay." Maggie didn't respond. She just saved the post to a new folder she'd created, titled Evidence, Misuse. She looked out over her tiny lawn. The tea was sweating through the glass. Across town, Clay was preparing the first draft of the letter that would change everything. Plano had cooled slightly by late April, the kind of mellow spring where you could still leave your windows open until noon without the AC growling in protest. Maggie sat on the bench outside Deshaun Brooks' real estate office, folder in hand, watching her reflection in the glass as she waited. Her reflection didn't fidget, it didn't blink, just sat still and sure, the way a storm waits before choosing where to land. Deshaun was younger than she remembered, maybe 35 now, but his confidence had matured in the best way. He greeted her with the same respectful nod he used when he'd first helped refinance her sister's duplex 10 years ago. "You ready to list?" he asked, glancing at the thick folder under her arm. Maggie slid it across the desk. Under the LLC, quiet listing. Discreet buyers only. No online splash. Deshaun raised an eyebrow. "You want private offers only?" "I want clean money, real intention, and no tire kickers from social media. And the LLC is still active, Hall Legacy Management, filed under my trust. Let's keep it out of their name." He whistled softly. "You already did the hard part, huh?" Maggie gave him a long look. They just never understood that the hard part came after the check cleared. Later that afternoon, Clay emailed her a PDF draft labeled Protective Clause, Title Holder's First Right of Liquidation. It outlined the ownership chain through the LLC, the recorded co-ownership deed, the grantor authority, and the clause giving Maggie exclusive right to list and sell the property without prior notice. She read every word twice. By dusk, the house was online, privately listed under a buyers-only portal Deshaun used for high-net-worth clients and trust sales. The photographs were pristine. Empty rooms flooded with light, the kitchen staged with clean marble countertops and a single bowl of lemons. It looked like a catalog, like a place no one actually lived. Maggie scrolled through the slideshow slowly, taking it all in. There was the couch that Rachel guarded like a museum piece. The dining room table where Eric had once spilled gravy on Thanksgiving and made everyone laugh for 10 full seconds. The guest room she hadn't slept in since last Christmas. Surreal didn't cover it. Her phone buzzed. Lacey, Grandma, are you okay? Maggie stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Better than I've ever been. No emojis, no caveats, just truth. Across town, in that four-bedroom house now being appraised and picked apart by strangers in business casual, Eric spooned green beans onto his plate while Rachel scrolled on her phone with one thumb and sipped wine with the other. Eric frowned. Weird calls today. Some guy asked if our home inspection was scheduled yet. Rachel snorted. Probably spam. Or phishing. People are crazy lately. He nodded, unsure, then looked toward the front window as if it might explain something. Back in her home, Maggie clicked the final confirmation button on the escrow dashboard. Listing active. Title verified. She leaned back in her chair, exhaled slowly, and let her fingers rest on the table. The evening news played low in the background. She didn't need to hear it. Her storm had already begun. The conference room in Clay Monroe's law office hadn't changed much since Maggie had first signed over $212,000 to rescue her son's home. Same black leather chairs, same humming fluorescent light that made even legal victories feel like dental appointments. This time, though, Maggie sat at the head of the table. Clay slid the printed counteroffer toward her. His silver cufflinks glinted as he flipped to the signature line. Buyer accepted, he said. Full offer, no contingencies. Cash verified. Maggie didn't smile. Not yet. She read the contract line by line, like always, then pulled a pen from her purse and signed with deliberate care. Her signature was slower than it used to be, but it was steadier. Clay sealed the packet, tapped it twice. Closing in 8 business days. Everything's in motion. Not everything, Maggie said. She reached into her folder and passed him a single sheet, her own addendum, handwritten in blue ink but notarized in Gwen's living room the night before. It read notification to co-residents, Eric and Rachel Hall, to be issued upon transfer of ownership only. Not during escrow. No pre-disclosure permitted without my written reversal. Clay gave a slow nod. So ordered. You're sure? I want the truth to hit the porch before it hits their inbox. Maggie said, her voice firm. Let them feel what it's like to be the last to know. That evening, Maggie sat in her den with the fireproof box open beside her. One by one, she initiated transfers, small amounts, careful movements from her retirement trust into a private equity line she'd been maintaining quietly for years. Each wire was earmarked for tax cushioning, nonprofit rollover, and Lacey's future. She wasn't just selling. She was securing. Across town, Gwen opened her laptop and began drafting the final communications clause. The language has to be tight, she muttered, scrolling through Rachel's Facebook once more. She'll weaponize any crack in tone. The most recent post was a photo of Rachel standing in the kitchen, holding a paint swatch next to the cabinets. Caption, Cream Quartz is coming. Our home is our legacy, and legacies deserve upgrades. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Gwen snorted. Legacy my ass. Maggie clicked Save as PDF, then saved again, just in case. She created a folder labeled Digital Evidence, Claim versus Fact. Screenshots, timestamps, public declarations. If it ever came to court, she'd have more than just paper. She'd have proof of Rachel's ignorance, pride, and entitlement, all preserved in pixel-perfect smugness. Deshawn texted the next morning, confirmed. Closing date is Thursday next week. Buyer wired deposit. All green lights, followed by a thumbs up emoji and the word fireproof. Maggie sat back in her kitchen chair, sipping black coffee with no cream. She didn't need soft edges anymore. The walls around her buzzed with quiet satisfaction, like the hum of justice waiting its turn. She glanced out the window toward the garden where her late husband used to plant tomatoes in crooked rows. His boots still sat under the back bench, dusted with time. You should have seen the claws, she said quietly to no one. You would have been proud of that one. The breeze moved through the kitchen screen. She didn't flinch. Saturday morning in Plano began with wind chimes and wind warnings. The breeze smelled faintly of cedar mulch and distant pollen, spring trying to prove something. Maggie pulled her cardigan tighter as she unlocked the side gate behind the house. She'd parked around the corner, out of view. Her walk was steady, key in hand, as if she were returning home from an ordinary errand. Deshawn arrived exactly at 10, business casual in pressed slacks and aviators, a binder tucked under one arm and optimism in the other. The woman trailing him was in her late 40s, salt and pepper hair swept into a neat bun, dressed like someone who understood both escrow and hard-earned comfort. Maggie, Deshawn said, with a nod and a quieter tone than usual. Buyer's name is Laurel Hayes, from Austin. Former symphony cellist turned urban agriculture nonprofit founder. Laurel extended her hand. I'm not here to haggle, I just want somewhere that doesn't feel like a display case. Maggie unlocked the back door, with the duplicate key she'd copied months ago. The key Rachel insisted was lost after the last locksmith appointment. The door opened without protest. Inside, the house was staged just enough. Cushions puffed, counters wiped clean, air freshened faintly with a cinnamon vanilla diffuser, plugged discreetly behind the coat closet. Laurel stepped through the kitchen first, eyes scanning with careful affection. This is honest. You can tell someone actually lived here, and not just for photos. She walked room by room, speaking softly to herself. Piano would go there. Sunroom stays, obviously. Maybe a book wall. Maggie trailed a few paces behind, saying nothing. This wasn't her performance. In the living room, Laurel paused to take in the fireplace. Maggie stopped too. Her gaze caught on a single photo still sitting on the mantel. It was Alan, her late husband, in his Navy uniform, arm around a much younger Eric. The frame was slightly tilted. She hadn't touched it since Christmas 3 years ago. Your husband? Laurel asked, following her eyes. Maggie nodded. The best parts of him never needed defending. She didn't mention how Alan had always insisted they buy Eric a house one day. She didn't explain how she'd ended up doing it alone. Some truths earned their silence. Laurel moved to the window, pulling the curtain back. It feels like the kind of place that deserves laughter again. From the porch, Gwen's voice chimed gently. She'd arrived without knocking, holding a to-go coffee in each hand and wearing a smile that said told you so. She passed Maggie a cup, nodding toward Laurel inside. She the one. Maggie didn't answer. She just sipped and stared at the photo above the fireplace. You didn't leave this house, Gwen said, voice soft but certain. They did. Before noon, Deshawn's phone buzzed. He looked down, exhaled slowly, then turned to Maggie. Buyer's bank wired full down payment. It's real now. We're past the point of no return. Maggie didn't blink. Good. He hesitated. We'll need to notify them soon. They'll lose their minds. Maggie set her coffee on the entry table, adjusted the angle of the photo frame one last time, and turned toward the door. They lost something, she said. But it wasn't their minds. She stepped outside, the spring wind lifting the edge of her sweater like it had somewhere else to be. Eric showed up at her doorstep just after 7 in the evening, wearing the kind of expression that begged to be explained away, tight-jawed, half-hopeful, still dressed in the khakis he'd worn to work, but with a button undone at the collar, like he'd run straight from the car. Maggie didn't invite him in. She didn't need to. Mom, he started, voice already defensive. What's going on? What is all this? She didn't answer at first, just turned toward the sideboard, where a neatly stapled document sat waiting in a blue plastic folder. She handed it to him without ceremony. He blinked down at it. Read the title page, then the bolded header near the middle. Co-ownership agreement, right of first sale, and exclusive title execution. Margaret A. Hall. This can't be real, Eric murmured, eyes scanning faster now. You're selling the house? I'm executing the clause we agreed to, Maggie said quietly. Eric looked up. But Rachel and I live there. Lacey knows, Maggie interrupted. And so do you. You just forgot. He opened his mouth to argue, but before a syllable could form, tires screeched outside. Rachel's SUV came to a sharp halt along the curb, her door slamming hard enough to rattle the side mirror. She stormed up the walkway in heels too high for gravel and anger too loud for evening light. You can't sell our house, she spat before she even reached the porch. You can't just sneak around like some corporate spy, and what even is this? Who even does that to their own family? Maggie didn't move. You never bought it. Rachel's face went white, then red. What did you just say? I said, Maggie replied, her voice crisp as brittle paper. You never bought it. I did, and all I asked in return was respect and space. You gave me neither. Eric shifted his weight. Rachel, maybe we should? No, Rachel snapped. No more of this nice boy act. She's throwing us out. Maggie looked directly at her son. I didn't throw anyone out. I followed the rules, the ones I paid for. Eric looked back at the document, flipping pages like he was trying to outrun the meaning. Is this legal? He whispered. It's binding, Maggie said. And enforceable. She stepped forward. Not aggressive, not apologetic, just firm. Eric, she said, locking eyes with him. Your mortgage was my mercy. Now it's my leverage. He took a step back like the words had weight. They did. From inside the house, Gwen called out, email sent. She walked into view holding her tablet like a courtroom exhibit. Clay's been notified. Clock starts now. Rachel spun on her heel, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Fine. I'll call my parents. Maybe they can stop this insanity. She stepped to the side, pacing fast, thumb jabbing the screen like it owed her loyalty. 2 rings, then silence. Then, you've reached the voicemail of Mark and Evelyn Coleman. Please leave a message. Rachel tried again, then again. Her voice was getting shrill. Mom? Dad? Pick up. The 3rd attempt went straight to voicemail. She stared at the screen, jaw working like she might chew through it. Maggie turned to Eric, her voice lower now. You always thought silence meant I didn't notice, that it meant I'd stay quiet forever. Eric looked up, eyes finally shifting into something real. I didn't think it would come to this. No, Maggie said. You thought I wouldn't come to this. She stepped back into the house, Gwen closing the door behind her with the quiet decisiveness of a gavel. The measuring tape snapped open with a metallic zing, echoing louder than expected in the vaulted living room. Rachel stood frozen at the foot of the staircase, barefoot in leggings and an oversized sweater, her morning coffee cooling rapidly in one hand. Across from her, Laurel and a soft-spoken contractor named Gabe were discussing structural load and drywall, refacing like they were choosing curtains for a wedding venue. This wall could be opened up here, Gabe said, gesturing toward the dining area. Just have to check for ductwork. Rachel blinked once. Excuse me, who even are you people? Deshawn gave her a perfectly practiced realtor's smile. Apologetic, polite, but with zero wiggle room. Per the agreement and deed transfer process, the buyer is entitled to 2 pre-closing site visits. This is one of them. I never agreed to that, she snapped. Laurel didn't even look at her. She was already visualizing furniture layouts. You didn't need to, Deshawn said, cool as steel. You're not on the title. Outside, parked discreetly 1 house down, Maggie sat in the driver's seat of her Camry. Engine off, windows cracked an inch. The air still smelled like bark mulch and ozone. Plano spring, crisp and judgmental. She sipped from a travel mug and watched the front of the house like a private screening of a film she'd financed but never directed. Back inside, Eric appeared at the hallway corner, running a hand through his hair. This is not okay, he muttered. You can't just barge in. Not into our bedroom. Deshawn turned toward him. Legally, you've been notified. And legally, that's not your bedroom anymore. The buyer is entitled to see every room in a property they're paying cash for. Laurel gave Eric a faint, nonchalant glance. I'd like to confirm the windows are original, she said to Gabe. Eric moved to block the hallway. Look, can we not go in there? My our stuff is still. Gabe looked at Deshawn. Deshawn shrugged. Then it'll be documented as obstructed access and flagged with the buyer's legal team. That could delay closing or cancel it. Rachel looked like she might implode. Eric hesitated, then stepped aside. Laurel walked into the master bedroom like it was already hers. Rachel finally stormed out the front door, slamming it behind her with a scream of frustration. She spotted Maggie immediately. You're evil, she shouted. stomping toward the car like fury might rewrite the facts. Maggie calmly opened her car door, set her mug into the cup holder, and stood. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. "You're evicted," she said. Rachel stopped walking. The word hung in the air like thunder, too proud to be followed by rain. Rachel's hands trembled. "You think this makes you powerful? You think this makes you right?" Maggie tilted her head. "No, just makes me the owner." The screen door creaked open again, Laurel stepping onto the porch, clipboard in hand, voice light. "Deshawn, can we check basement clearance next?" "On it," he said, already moving. Eric appeared behind her, shoulders low, eyes dull. For a split second, he looked like the boy Maggie used to pick up from football practice, muddy, dazed, not quite sure what had hit him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. One new voicemail. She didn't need to check. Clay always left confirmation calls when the timeline locked. 14 days. It was nearly 10 p.m. when Maggie heard the knock. Not sharp, not frantic, just 3 soft taps like someone asking for shelter, not answers. She opened the door and found Lacey standing there in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big and slippers that had seen better seasons. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, headphones slung around her neck, and her backpack was already halfway unzipped, like she'd packed in a hurry and couldn't be bothered to double-check. "I can't sleep there," Lacey said quietly. Not with her yelling, not with him pretending it's all going to work out. Maggie stepped aside without a word. Lacey walked in, dropped her bag by the kitchen island, and waited. Maggie led her down the hall and opened the guest room door. The bed was made, the sheets crisp, a faint scent of lavender rising from the pillowcase. "It's yours as long as you want," she said. Lacey didn't respond with thanks. She didn't need to. The way she exhaled, shoulders dropping, tension melting from her jaw, said everything. While Lacey showered, Maggie made a pot of decaf and sat at the kitchen table with Gwen, who had arrived earlier with 2 laptops and a calm fury in her bones. Rachel had gone live on Facebook less than 2 hours ago, phone in one hand, wine glass in the other, pacing in front of a ring light like a third-tier influencer. "She stole our house," Rachel had cried, mascara smudged into the corners of her eyes. "She's a thief with a checkbook and a god complex." The comments had been predictable. A handful of high school acquaintances offering vague sympathy. One of her yoga friends typed sending prayers while another posted a crying emoji, followed by "you deserve peace." But one reply, Gwen noticed, stood out, a short comment from an anonymous account that read simply, "You signed, she saved. Pick one." Gwen saved everything. Screenshots, video, timestamps, even metadata. "She's not just wrong," Gwen said, scrolling with quiet efficiency. "She's slandering. That's actionable." Maggie didn't nod, didn't need to. She was watching the steam curl off her mug like smoke from a fire long put out. Her phone lit up again. Clay's name. She opened the text, closing date, moved to Monday. Buyer wired full balance. Legally irreversible. She let the screen dim. The house wasn't pending. It was sold. The terms had clicked into place like a lock, engaging, cold, final, exact. She looked toward the hallway, where Lacey had left her damp sneakers by the door. 17 and already learning that silence and survival weren't the same thing. Maggie stood, walked into the living room, and opened the text thread she hadn't touched in months. Eric Hall, still marked as muted. She unmuted him, unblocked him, typed 2 lines. "You made your bed. You just never thought I'd fold the sheets." Then she hit send. Blocked him again. Across town, Eric would read it in the dark, in a house already half packed by strangers, half haunted by his mother's handwriting. Maggie closed her phone and stepped out onto the porch. The stars were faint tonight, but the wind was sharp and clean. Behind her, Gwen closed the laptop with a soft click. "Want me to sleep on the couch, just in case?" Maggie shook her head. "No need." The worst parts already showed themselves. Inside, Lacey emerged, hair damp, face quiet. "Want tea?" Maggie asked. Lacey nodded. If you're making it, Maggie smiled and turned on the kettle. The side they never saw was the side that wouldn't break. The email arrived at 9:03 a.m. sharp. Subject line, Final Title Confirmation. File closed. Maggie clicked it open at her kitchen counter, her glasses low on her nose, a slice of wheat toast untouched beside her. From Clay Monroe to Margaret A. Hall, effective immediately, the property known as 17 Woodview Circle is no longer titled under Hall Legacy Management. Transfer of deed completed. County records will update within 24 hours. New ownership, Laurel Hayes. All responsibilities, rights, and liabilities are now hers. Maggie stared at the blinking cursor next to the PDF attachment. Not because she didn't understand, because she understood exactly. The house was no longer hers. And it was even less theirs. Across town, in that shrinking shrine of curated throw pillows and overpriced kitchen updates, Eric and Rachel had just become legal squatters. Their name wasn't on the deed. Their lease wasn't signed, and now the new owner's timeline had begun. Sheriff Monroe, a man Maggie had known since his rookie days, called at noon. We've got a lock change scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m., he said. Unless they vacate before then, which doesn't sound likely. Maggie just said, understood, and wrote it down in her day planner like it was any other appointment. By mid-afternoon, Gwen had arrived, tote bag in hand, wearing her paperwork armor, tailored slacks, black flats, and a chambray blouse with a collar sharp enough to file motions. She laid a will amendment packet on the table. You sure about this? Maggie nodded. It was never for Eric. He was just the excuse I used for too long. They filled in the blanks. Beneficiary. Lacey Hall designation, full remainder of property sale profits. Allocated to Educational and Housing Advancement Trust. Activation date. Immediate Gwen slid the updated file into a manila envelope. She'll have a start most girls only dream of. She earned it, Maggie said. Not because she picked me, because she saw me. The phone rang that evening. Maggie didn't answer. The voicemail was short, just breathing at first. Then Eric's voice cracked and brittle. Mom, I don't know what to say. I didn't mean for this to get so far. Rachel's losing it. And God, I think I lost everything. Please, can we just talk? The message ended. Maggie deleted it without saving. From the couch, Gwen didn't look up. They don't cry for you, she said. They cry for the carpet, for the granite countertops, for what their pride built on someone else's dime. Maggie didn't argue. She opened the front closet and pulled out an old cedar box. Inside, she found a photo of Eric at 5 years old, missing tooth popsicle stain on his shirt, eyes wide with something he hadn't carried in decades. She tucked the photo back inside. Outside, wind pressed gently against the house, like even spring knew when to be soft. At 6:42 p.m., her phone buzzed again. A text from Clay, deed filed with the county. Legal control complete. They'll be served paperwork by morning. No fireworks, no champagne, just finality dressed as paperwork. Maggie turned toward the guest room. Lacey had fallen asleep reading, one arm draped over a novel, the other curled under her cheek like she hadn't rested in weeks. Maggie stood in the doorway a moment longer, then closed the door halfway, enough to keep out the hallway light, enough to say, "You're safe." Friday came with a crisp breeze and a sheriff's cruiser parked in the cul-de-sac. The official lock change had happened at 10:03 a.m., clean, procedural, uneventful. Rachel and Eric hadn't shown. A deputy supervised while movers boxed up the last of their personal effects. Rachel's oversized ring light, 3 pairs of heeled ankle boots, a half-used bottle of boutique olive oil still sealed in bubble wrap. All of it stacked on the curb in carefully labeled boxes: master closet kitchen, misc office, Eric's tools. No one came to claim them. At noon, Laurel arrived with a clipboard and a neutral linen scarf looped around her neck. The buyer's grace was quiet, practical. She didn't gloat. She just nodded at Maggie in greeting, eyes steady with something that might have been respect or understanding. Final walkthrough, Laurel said softly. Let's finish it, Maggie replied. The house had gone still inside. No footsteps, no scented candles trying too hard. Just the echo of shoes on bare floors and the creak of air vents rediscovering the space. The sunroom had already been cleared. No more magazine-perfect staging. No more throw pillows arranged like a retail catalog. Only light. Laurel stepped in and sat on the wide sill where the love seat used to be. Maggie joined her, the two women facing the street through clear panes of glass. Outside, Gwen stood on the lawn, snapping time-stamped photos as part of the final condition report. Her expression was professional but not cold. This was closure, not spectacle. You ever sit in here? Laurel asked. Gaze on the neighborhood beyond. Maggie nodded slowly. Once. It cost me $200,000 and a bruised knee. Laurel smiled faintly. Worth it? Maggie didn't answer right away. Just followed the arc of a red-tailed hawk as it coasted over the rooftops. Then ask me again in a year. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path outside. Lacey came around the corner of the house, carrying a cardboard box. She wore black jeans, a flannel shirt tied at her waist, and her old-school ID lanyard looped into a keychain now. The box read Eric's Tools in fading Sharpie. She set it down near the curb and exhaled. He hasn't fixed a single thing in 15 years, she muttered. What's he gonna do? Rebuild pride. Maggie stepped beside her and looked at the box. The tape was already peeling. Some things never built anything, she said. Lacey didn't laugh, but she didn't cry either. Back inside, Gwen finished her rounds and handed Laurel a digital file of time-stamped images. All documented. All defensible. Laurel tapped her screen twice. Funds cleared. Lock codes changed. It's done. They stood in silence for a beat longer. The air carried no tension now. Just a finality too wide for words. From inside the open trunk of Maggie's car, the edge of an old cedar jewelry box peeked out, tucked beside Lacey's duffel, and a new set of door keys on a silver chain. Maggie stepped back toward the house for one last glance through the front window. The sun hit the glass just right, washing the now empty space in gold. She didn't wave. She didn't linger. She just whispered, mostly to herself, "This was never your forever. It was your turn." By Sunday morning, the storm had moved online. Rachel's Facebook profile, now set to public again, featured a post dripping with drama and dim lighting. She'd taken a selfie from what looked like a borrowed guest room, pale beige walls behind her, the usual filters failing to hide the exhaustion. Caption: My mother-in-law is dead to this family. She stole our home, tore our daughter from us, and parades around like a hero. There's a special place for people like that. The comments poured in. Some were pity, some were confusion. One or two were harsh enough to be deleted within the hour. But Maggie didn't flinch. She had something better than a rebuttal. She had the truth, and a readership. By Tuesday, the monthly newsletter for the Plano Meadow Ridge Homeowners Council went out with a feature letter submitted by Margaret A. Hall, former resident of 17 Woodview Circle. The subject line read, "When Family Hurts, Recognizing Elder Financial Exploitation in Plain Sight." It was measured, unemotional, brutally clear. Maggie didn't name names. She didn't have to. She laid out the patterns: cohabitation under false promises, silencing through passive aggression, the isolation disguised as boundaries and financial dependency, masked as support. She included bullet points, resources, and a quote from her late husband's will about dignity outliving possessions. At the bottom, she signed it in full. Margaret A. Hall, retired loan officer, widow, survivor. Gwen proofed the letter, but didn't need to touch a thing. "It reads like closing arguments," she said, smiling. Lacey asked for a copy for her sociology class. "We're doing a unit on systemic silence. I want to use this." Maggie printed it on thick linen paper and placed it in a clear binder. "Put it under legacy, not trauma," she said. That afternoon, Deshaun called. He sounded amused. "You wrote that?" "I did." He whistled. "Mind if I frame a copy for the waiting room?" Clients need to read something real between brochures. Go ahead, Maggie said. But center the part about silence not being kindness. Across town, Clay was less sentimental. He sent Rachel a certified envelope, straightforward legalese with just enough barbed precision to make the point sting. Subject: defamation of character, cease and desist notification. Attached were screenshots, public timestamps, and the clause from the co-ownership agreement Rachel had apparently never read. Inside the envelope, Clay included a post-it note in his own handwriting. Consider this your last free lesson in literacy. Rachel didn't respond. But Eric's social media vanished overnight, accounts deleted, photos pulled, LinkedIn scrubbed to bare bone. In the quiet that followed, Maggie returned to the sunroom. Her sunroom now. It wasn't large, just a clean addition off the back of her home. Gwen had gifted her a potted orchid that bloomed white and lean in the corner. Lacey had painted one wall soft coral, something that glows without trying. Maggie sat with a cup of chamomile, staring out into the yard. The world hadn't burned. It had just clarified. Outside, a squirrel scurried along the fence line, cautious but free. Her phone buzzed once, unknown number. No message, just silence. She set it face down. The war had gone quiet, but quiet didn't mean over. The certificate was printed on embossed cardstock, handed over with a modest handshake, and announced in a voice just slightly too loud for the rec center's acoustics. Still, the room stood for her. Presented to Margaret A. Hall for outstanding advocacy and protection of elder rights in Collin County. Behind her, Lacey sat in the second row between Gwen and Clay, holding her phone upright to record the moment, eyes shining but dry. She had insisted on being there, even skipped her last period history quiz. When the applause faded and Maggie stepped down from the podium, Lacey rose to speak. She hadn't planned to. No speech prepared, no note cards. Just something small she needed to say. She didn't just teach me how to sign, Lacey said, voice carrying more weight than her frame should have allowed. She taught me what not to sign, who not to trust. And that love doesn't mean letting people use your hands to write their stories. The room fell still. A few quiet murmurs of agreement. One of the council members blinked fast behind thick bifocals. Maggie touched Lacey's shoulder as she passed, steadying them both. Later that evening, back in her own living room, Maggie tucked the certificate between two books on the shelf, not to hide it, but to remind herself that pride didn't need framing. Purpose didn't beg for display. Gwen was already at the dining table, phone in one hand, reading glasses perched on her head. She pointed toward the inbox. She sent a photo. Maggie joined her. On the screen was an image from Laurel, the new homeowner. The front of 17 Woodview Circle was newly painted a soft sage green. The windows had been replaced, trim sealed and bright, and a vine of fresh jasmine curled along the porch rail. In the caption, Laurel had written, "Thank you for building something I could begin with." Maggie stared at it for a long time. "It looks softer," she said. Gwen tilted her head. "Or maybe it just finally breathes." In the hallway, Clay emerged with a file folder, waving it slightly like a closing argument held tight in manila. "Updated your records," he said. Asset moved. Drama closed. He handed it to her with a wink. Inside was a notarized letter from the county confirming the final tax rollover to Laurel's trust, a closed escrow statement, and the updated value declaration for Maggie's adjusted estate. But behind it, he'd tucked something else. A framed printout of the original mortgage receipt from 3 years prior, $212,438.76, paid in full. Transaction date March 3, 20XX. By Margaret A. Hall. Gwen grinned. "We figured you needed something to hang above the coffee machine." Maggie laughed, a real one. A sound from the chest, not the throat. As the sun fell behind the hedge line and the kitchen warmed with the scent of cinnamon tea, she reached into her drawer and pulled out the draft bylaws for the trust she'd been quietly forming. The Hall Foundation for Independent Seniors. Housing access and advocacy, no press release. No gala, just a future for people like her. "Let's start with 5 grants a year," she said, handing the draft to Gwen. Displaced elders, legal fees, deposits, first month rent, whatever buys them the breathing room, no one gives us. You're building again, Gwen said softly. This time without permission. Maggie didn't answer. She didn't need to. The email pinged again, this time from the regional council. Subject line, feature request. Would you write a column for our state newsletter? Maggie clicked save for later. Outside, the porch light flickered on. Lacey was already setting out the recycling bin, humming under her breath, like someone who no longer had to whisper to stay safe. Maggie watched from the doorway, file folder still in hand. She had no map for what came next. But for once, no one else was holding the pen. The courtroom smelled faintly of antiseptic and wood polish, the way all small county courtrooms do, like something had been cleaned too late and too fast. Maggie didn't need to be there. Clay told her that plainly. This is a procedural joke, he'd said, almost offended. It'll get tossed before the second paperclip hits the docket. Still she came. Sat 2 rows behind the defense table in a navy blouse and quiet earrings, her purse folded in her lap like she was waiting on choir practice, not civil court. Rachel arrived 4 minutes late and 3 decibels too loud, her heels clicking like entitlement had a soundtrack. She wore black as if mourning something other than her own pride, lips pinched, hands fluttering with papers she didn't fully understand. Your Honor, her lawyer began. Some tired man from a billboard near the interstate. We contend that Mrs. Hall used deceptive means to manipulate the co-ownership agreement, and we seek reversal of sale under the premise of undue influence and elder fraud. Clay didn't even stand. He just leaned forward, opened one folder, and said calmly, "We filed a motion to dismiss, based on signed contractual authority, notarized execution, and full statutory compliance, affidavits included. Also, opposing counsel has misrepresented the defendant's age. Mrs. Hall was the lender, not the dependent party." The judge, gray suit, wire rims, no time for nonsense, barely looked up. "Mrs. Hall," he said, voice flat, "do you feel you were manipulated?" "No," Maggie said. "I feel I was exhausted." 14 minutes later, the gavel came down. Case dismissed with prejudice. Counsel for Mrs. Hall may file for fees. Rachel froze. Her lawyer turned red from the neck upward. Maggie didn't gloat. She simply stood, gathered her bag, and walked out. By the time she and Gwen reached the parking lot, the court clerk had already emailed the ruling summary. Clay sent a text 5 minutes later, filed for attorney's fees and court costs, awarded $3,500. Gwen looked over Maggie's shoulder as she read it, sipping from her metal thermos like it was whiskey. "Keep it?" Maggie shook her head. "Donate it." Gwen grinned. "To who?" Maggie smiled thinly. "Texas Women's Legal Aid. Anonymous." But in Rachel Coleman Hall's name. The receipt arrived by email that afternoon. Maggie printed it on ivory paper and pinned it to the fridge with a butterfly magnet. Lacey saw it when she came home from school. "She's gonna implode when she finds out," Lacey said, eyes wide. "Maybe," Maggie said. "But at least this time she'll be funding something useful." Lacey stared at the receipt for a long second, then let out a sound no one had heard in months, real, full-throated laughter. It startled both Gwen and Maggie into laughing too. Brief, unpolished, unfiltered joy crashing through the kitchen like sunlight after a long thunderstorm. "That," Gwen said, between chuckles, "is the kind of petty I respect." Maggie reached for a peach from the fruit bowl, tossed it gently to Lacey, and leaned against the counter. "I'm not here for revenge," she said, tone cool but firm. "I'm just done donating my silence." From the living room, the wind outside nudged the wind chimes Maggie had finally rehung. 3 soft notes, light and even. Clay called again around dinner time. "Just one question," he said. "Shoot," Maggie replied. "Do you want to file for permanent defamation protection?" "It's a formality, but," she thought about it. About all the years she bit her tongue in the name of family. About the bruised kneecap, the unsigned birthday cards, the deleted voicemails and folded apologies that never came. "No," she said finally. "I'm filing something else instead." There was a pause. "And what's that?" he asked. Maggie glanced down at the notepad by her kitchen phone. where she'd been sketching the opening lines of her first column for the state newsletter. She smiled. My voice. It began with the outline of chalk lines on flattened grass and the low hum of a power drill. By midweek, the skeletal frame of Maggie's new sunroom had risen from the backyard like a quiet declaration. Gwen called it the reclamation project. Maggie just called it necessary. No blueprints from old wounds, no shared ownership, no legacy to beg for. Just wood, glass, and the dignity of space wholly her own. The contractor was a woman named Renee. Sharp eyes, no small talk, good with permits. She called the build a clean footprint, the kind of phrase Maggie appreciated more than compliments. The beams went up quickly, the roof sealed tight, the windows wide and clear. By Friday, the inside was bare and glowing, sunlight catching in the corners like it had been waiting for this exact angle all along. Lacey came that afternoon with 2 paint cans under one arm and a playlist queued on her phone. I know you like green, she said, prying the lid open, but this feels more like you. It was soft gold, somewhere between tea and sunflowers, and by sunset the walls pulsed with quiet warmth. They didn't talk much while painting, just moved together in comfortable rhythm. Brush, step, glance, pass the roller. When they finished, Lacey stood in the center of the room, hands on hips, speckled with dried paint. It feels like yours, she said, simply. Maggie didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next day, Gwen arrived with something swaddled in an old quilt. You bought me a baby? Maggie asked dryly. Better, Gwen said. She unwrapped the gift slowly. It was a chair, solid walnut, graceful in shape, with a back high enough to support thought. Along the top rail, engraved in small burnished letters, not furniture. Foundation. Maggie touched the words with one fingertip. Had it done by that woman in Grapevine, Gwen said. The one who carves Bibles and baseball bats. I love it, Maggie whispered. That afternoon, Maggie set the chair near the window and lowered herself into it like one claims a pulpit, not a seat. A woven throw over her knees, a binder in her lap. Deed books, trust law, statutes that had once felt like a foreign language but now read like a survival manual. Lacey passed by with a glass of lemonade and paused in the doorway. You studying again? Maggie looked up. Just making sure the next woman who gets cornered knows what corner she's in. Lacey smiled. I think she will. The breeze slipped through the barely cracked window. Fresh cut grass, honeysuckle from the neighbor's fence, the hum of some distant mower. The wind didn't shake the walls. It filled them. Outside, the jasmine vine Gwen had planted along the porch rail curled tighter to the lattice, blooming slowly in the late Texas light. The name Rachel had not been spoken in weeks. Not out of fear, not from avoidance. Just the same way one doesn't speak of things that no longer hold relevance, like an expired password or a storm that passed without cracking a single pane. Maggie turned a page in her binder. Somewhere outside the room, a doorbell rang. She didn't move, not right away. Instead, she let the light pour across the floorboards and onto the wood grain of the chair. This time, she was ready to be still. It began not with a signature, but a breath. Maggie sat at the sunroom table, hands folded, watching the ink dry on the final document of the Hall Lacey Real Estate Empowerment Grant. The file lay crisp and centered beside a cup of cooled coffee and a bowl of dried lavender sprigs. Her name was at the top. Lacey's at the bottom. The space between them filled with purpose. The grant would offer small seed funds to young women pursuing licensure in property law, real estate, appraisal, whatever corner of the industry they chose. 5 recipients a year. No essays, just proof of intent and a place to start. Are you sure you don't want your name first? Lacey asked gently. You're the one who know. No, Maggie said, not looking up. That's exactly why your name goes first. Lacey reached across the table and pulled her into a hug. Not one of those soft-shouldered, hesitant embraces. This one was solid. Built. Mint. You built something that lasts, she whispered. Maggie rested her chin on Lacey's shoulder for a second longer than either of them expected. Outside, the jasmine vines whispered in the breeze, fuller now, clinging to the wood with faith that it would hold. Gwen arrived just after lunch, wearing her usual steel-trimmed calm and holding a camera instead of a file. For the board, she said, they want something for the website. And you're not getting away with just a line drawing this time. Maggie rolled her eyes. Just don't Photoshop the wrinkles. I earned every one. Gwen raised the lens. Maggie sat by the window, sun at her shoulder, trust bylaws open beside her like scripture. Gwen clicked once, then twice, then paused. You look like someone who finished the sentence she started. Maggie offered a dry smile. I did, they didn't say more. Some moments don't need polishing. At 3:17 p.m., Clay's name pinged in her inbox. Subject final record, grant and foundation attached IRS confirmation, filed bylaws, legal summary, account registration. In the body of the email, a single line, all finalized. Story closed. Maggie didn't open the attachments right away. Instead, she rose from her chair and crossed the sunroom floor to the far wall where Gwen had mounted the custom plaque that arrived last week. Burnished bronze, walnut backing, font simple and true. She was not just a guest. She was the reason the house stood. Maggie ran her fingers over the edge. No splinters, no gaps. Lacey passed by the doorway, carrying 2 mason jars of iced tea. Porch or here? Here, Maggie said. Already turning back toward the chair Gwen gave her, the one that had never squeaked or splintered, no matter how many hours she sat sorting law from memory. She took the tea, sipped once, and let the silence settle into the corners. This house didn't need to be quiet anymore. It just needed to be hers. Maggie closed her eyes. Let the warmth slide across her skin. Let the wind stir the jasmine without asking permission. The world didn't owe her peace. But it sure as hell owed her this. Across the room, Gwen added the new photo to a folder marked Public Legacy Materials, M Hall. From the hallway, Lacey's voice floated in, playful but clear. Next time someone tells me I can't do it, I'm just gonna say, you ever heard of Maggie Hall? Maggie chuckled under her breath. She didn't need applause. Just a moment like this. A pause without pain. A room built with her own yes. And as the sun dipped lower and touched the edge of the plaque one final time, she let the thought rise. The one that had waited all year to be said aloud. They gave me a shove, she whispered. I gave them a sold sign.